it's Brent. This podcast was recorded on the afternoon of Monday, July 19th. Just moments before I published this episode, the Ministry of Health and Wellness released the latest information on COVID-19, recording 89 new cases over the weekend, bringing the total number of active cases in Belize to 332. Coming up, can there ever be justice for Laddie? And why anti-vaxxers are winning the information war in Belize.
You're listening to Brent's 2 Cents, the semi-serious thoughts of a guy in Belize. And now here's the host of this podcast from somewhere in Belize City, Brent Toombs.
I was there to the last second. Listen to me when I tell you that this was all a senseless murder. Senseless isn't the word. The cops and security intercepted us as we were heading back to Shalimar Resort. The men who caused us to run were dressed in all black, and they didn't shout police or security, so we took that as a red flag, as someone who wanted to rob or hurt us. So we ran the opposite way. I was instantly hit with a baton on my back, and then one shot was fired. Laddie fell instantly. I fell to my knees when I heard the shot. Then I was kicked up, hit several times, held at gunpoint as these dirty cops stood over me while I was on my back. Laddie was less than 20 feet away from me, not moving at all. They checked his pulse right there and then, and they all agreed that, boy, the man gone. The man get shot, boy. Then they returned their focus on me, saying, what will you do with he now? As the gun hovered inches above my face, they then kicked me up again and roughed me up. I asked if Laddie was all right, and nobody gave me a direct answer. Just, shut up, Lee boy, and stuff like that. They had us there for at least 10 minutes. Laddie was left there for 10 minutes before they even bothered to start doing anything right. My memories are scattered, and we are all in shock. But this will be dealt with justly. Laddie was my brother, and I love that youth very much. Always will. See you in heaven, little bro. Those words were written by 19-year-old Thomas Palacio and posted on his social media pages. I can't even read these words out loud without getting emotional. Thomas is the young man that survived a senseless and horrific encounter with 2 police officers in Placencia, who brutally beat him and shot and killed his 14-year-old friend, simply because they were on the beach at night. Hey, welcome to the podcast for the week of July 19th. For most of last week, I was certain that this podcast would be all about the anti-vaxxer movement that has suddenly become dangerously organized. And then, on Thursday morning, I woke up to the news that cops had shot and killed an innocent 14-year-old boy. And just like everyone else in Belize, that's what's been on my mind ever since. I'll still give you my 2 cents about the anti-vaxxers, but first, I need to talk about Laddie Gillett. Or should I say, about the culture that led to his killing. I'm not going to recount all the events leading up to Laddie's death or the immediate aftermath. That's been well documented in the news, on social media, and by Thomas Palacio himself. Laddie was killed, shot in the back while running from police who were kicking the shit out of his friend for the crime of being young, black, and on the beach after dark. As news of this senseless and perverse abuse of police power spread, Belize became galvanized by cries of justice for Laddie. But can there ever be justice for Laddie in a country where 9 out of every 10 accused killers walks out of court free as a bird? What chance is there for justice when the accused killer is a police officer? When his own squad brothers are the ones who investigate and are trusted not to bungle some procedure or lose some file or important piece of evidence that might lead to all charges against their colleague being dismissed. Maybe Laddie will be the exception. Maybe the current national outrage will last longer than the typical 72 or 96 hours, as is too often the reality in a country where life is cheap. Maybe the fact that Laddie's adoptive family have means and are so well respected in Belize that what happened to Laddie last Wednesday night on that beach in Placencia will be impossible to blow over like a lee breeze. Well, the early indications are not encouraging. On Friday, 27-year-old police corporal Kareem Martinez was arraigned for manslaughter. Not murder, manslaughter. Now, legally, the difference between manslaughter and murder is intent, and whether you deliberately took action that you knew could result in someone's death. Martinez, a trained police officer, drew his weapon, aimed it at a 14-year-old child, and pulled the trigger. There is no way in hell he can claim that he never knew his actions would result in the death of Laddie Gillett. His actions were intentional and deliberate. And that is murder, not manslaughter. But of course, manslaughter is a bailable offense, while murder is not. And the DPP, acting on whatever information that was provided by Kareem Martinez's co-workers, has decided that he only has to answer for the lesser charge. Gee, what a surprise. So now the cop accused of killing a child is free on bail, at least until his case goes to trial, which possibly could take years. So will there ever be justice for Laddie Gillett? Was there justice for Gilberto Sutz? 18-year-old Gilberto Sutz was killed by police officers while in custody in Keycocker in 2015. Sutz, along with his friend Manuel Guerra, had been detained for questioning for a burglary, despite Sutz having an alibi that he was not even on the island at the time the crime was committed. Police officers Leonard Nunes and Helat King brutally beat Sutz and Guerra, while 3 other officers on duty at the time watched without intervening. Guerra, who survived his ordeal, told the Amandala newspaper that police officers used pepper spray, tasers, and a live electrical wire to torture them. At one point, Guerra says the police beat him unconscious, and when he came to, he saw officers once again pepper spraying Gilberto Sutz before placing a plastic bag on his head, taping his mouth shut, and then beating the teenager relentlessly until he was dead. Nunes and King were originally charged with murder, but that charge was later reduced to manslaughter, and the cops were granted bail. It took 4 years to bring them to trial. Both men were found guilty of manslaughter, and each were sentenced to a mere 9 months in prison. But because they had already spent a grand total of 1 year and 6 months on remand, spread out over 2 periods of incarceration, the 2 convicted killers walked out of court as free men on the very day of their so-called sentencing. Stephen Buckley is still waiting for his justice. In 2010, Buckley was shot in the face at a checkpoint by Police Inspector Dennis Lopez. Lopez was charged with attempted murder, but his case has yet to go to trial. Buckley, who was left partially paralyzed on one side of his body and is unable to work, reached a $250,000 settlement with the government of Belize in 2013, but so far has only collected less than half of what GOB owes him. And here's the most disturbing footnote of the Buckley saga. Not only has the cop who shot him been free on bail for 11 years, but Dennis Lopez was reinstated by the Belize Police Department and given a promotion. Lopez is now the Deputy Commander of Police for Corozal. When questioned in 2019 about how Lopez could be given a promotion while he is still waiting to answer a charge of attempted murder, Commissioner of Police Chester Williams told News 5, quote, "I don't see any reason this should cause a controversy. Mr. Lopez has not yet been convicted in any court of law." End quote. Yeah, of course not, because it appears that the police and the entire so-called justice system in Belize will do anything to keep bad cops from being held accountable for shooting or killing unarmed citizens. Just ask the family and friends of Allison Major Jr. On the afternoon of July 16th, 2019, the well-known teacher and tour guide was being pursued by police in downtown Belize City who thought he appeared suspicious while driving. A chase ensued, and as Major approached the foot of the swing bridge, Police Corporal Kent Martinez, with no regard for the number of pedestrians and motorists at the crowded intersection, fired on Major from behind, hitting him in the head. The truck Major was driving crashed into a bus, and in plain sight of scores of witnesses and video surveillance cameras, police officers flung Major's body into the back of a police truck and transported him to the KHMH, where he was pronounced dead. It took 15 days before the DPP even brought charges against Kent Martinez. And you guessed it, the charge was for manslaughter. When Martinez was brought to court to be arraigned, the police did everything possible to protect him from the media, just as they did for Kareem Martinez at Magistrates Court last Friday in Belmopan. Kent Martinez has yet to be tried for killing Allison Major Jr., and a promised internal investigation and review of police policy regarding the use of deadly force during a pursuit appears to have never happened. Maybe if there'd been justice for Allison Major Jr. 2 years ago, we wouldn't be crying for justice for Laddie Gillett today. Maybe if the cop who shot Stephen Buckley in the face had been tried for his action instead of getting promoted, other officers might hesitate to shoot first and ask questions later. Maybe if those two animals who tortured and beat an 18-year-old to death while in police custody had received more than a slap on the wrist, and maybe if the 3 other cops who stood there and did absolutely nothing while their co-workers killed a teenager had been punished, maybe we would have fewer candlelight vigils, and maybe we'd have just a little bit more respect for law enforcement in Belize. Because at times like this, it's almost obligatory to have to say, not all cops are bad. And yes, not all cops are bad. But the system that enables and protects bad cops is completely and utterly rotten. Commissioner Williams can express empathy on camera all he wants. But is he going to do anything to change the culture within the Belize Police Department? Will Minister of National Security, Kareem Musa, who just 2 years ago was outraged when Kent Martinez was not charged for murder, demand an overhaul of the police department now that he is in charge? Will Belizeans demand better from officers who take the oath to protect and serve? Not just right now while we collectively grieve for Laddie Gillett. I'm talking about real, sustained pressure on officials to clean up the police department, to conduct a comprehensive review of policies and training, and to purge rogue cops from the force. And while we're busy getting pissed off, how about directing a bit of that ire towards the DPP's office and the judiciary? Because it's bad enough when murderers only get charged with manslaughter, but it's an even greater travesty of justice when those cases linger for years or get dismissed because of some stupid mistake that police and prosecutors make over and over and over again. History has taught us that once the initial sting and shock of this most recent tragedy wears off, most people will go back to either being apathetic, pessimistic, or simply unaware. So unless there is real reform of our police department and justice system, there will be more Hilberto Stotzes, more Stephen Buckleys, more Allison Majors, and more Laddie Gillets. And there won't be justice for anyone.
We want to hear from you. You can find Brent's 2 Cents on Twitter and Facebook at 2 Cents Belize, or email us at podcast@oxaproductions.com. That's OXA Productions with an S.com.
As of Friday, July 16th, Belize had 298 active cases of COVID-19, with 165 of those cases being reported in the previous 7 days. The death toll from the virus is now at 332 people. Over the weekend, the Carl Hughesner Memorial Hospital Authority issued a release that the country's major public hospital would be going back to emergency mode due to the sudden rise in COVID-19 cases. Last week, we also learned that at least one COVID-19 variant, Epsilon, is present in Belize. We are still waiting to find out if the much more dangerous Delta variant is here as well. Common sense suggests it probably is. Delta is the variant that is responsible for the latest surge of infections in parts of the world that up until a few weeks ago had appeared to have COVID-19 under control. And the people getting infected are now almost exclusively unvaccinated. Health experts have begun to refer to the crisis as a pandemic of the unvaccinated. National Public Radio in the United States reported that 97% of hospitalizations and 99% of people who die from COVID-19 are unvaccinated. Those statistics back up what earlier clinical vaccine trials determined, that getting vaccinated might not stop you from catching COVID-19, but it will almost certainly keep you out of the hospital or the grave. The vaccines work. Period. The vaccines have also been proven to be safe, not just in the trials conducted before mass vaccination campaigns began, but in the 6 months since. As of right now, nearly 3.7 billion people have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. That's almost half of all people on Earth. The number of adverse or serious side effects reported are so few that statistically speaking, they are virtually zero. According to the Center for Disease Control, serious allergic reactions occur in 2 to 5 out of every million people who receive the vaccine. In the United States, 38 cases of blood clots have been reported out of 13 million people who have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, a vaccine that's not even available in Belize. And most importantly, there have been no scientifically proven links between any death and COVID-19 vaccines. But yet, here in Belize, where as of today only a little over 100,000 people have been vaccinated, you will hear numerous anecdotal accounts about someone who knows someone who knows someone who became critically ill or died after getting vaccinated. One outspoken Belizean from Spanish Lookout, who is anti-vaxx, anti-mask, and anti-just about anything government-related, claims to know more people in Belize who have died from the vaccine than have died from the virus. So who are all these dead people he supposedly knows? Because according to his Facebook rant, he must know at least 323 people who died after getting vaccinated. And then last week came the mother lode of misinformation. A group calling themselves Belizean Rights and Justice Movement held a press conference to present their reasons why Belizeans should refuse to get vaccinated. Complete with conspiracy theories, alt-right fake news sources, and opinions formed in YouTube rabbit holes, nothing was too far-fetched for this group. Now, I could spend hours dissecting the Belize rights and justice movement and their dangerous anti-science, anti-intellectual agenda. But here are a few of the highlights. The group claimed to be getting medical advice from 4 doctors. Well, it turns out that 3 of those experts were not medical doctors at all. One of the advisors is a yoga instructor who claims to have an honorary doctorate in something, although his online bio does not say which institution bestowed such an honor upon him. And another one of the pretend doctors, supposedly advising this group, was outed by no less than the Department of Health Services for claiming to be a forensic pathologist when he never even completed medical school. The only doctor in this bunch to actually have a medical degree is Dr. Gerald Zuniga, who did practice at the KHMH for a few years before either being fired or asked to leave about 4 years ago. Since then, Zuniga claims to be a physician and surgeon at the Belize Holistic Health and Medical Institute, an institution that appears to only exist on Facebook. When pressed by reporters, Zuniga refused to answer a direct question about whether or not he believes COVID-19 is real. Instead, he started talking about how COVID vaccines are a coordinated global effort to reduce the world population. Zuniga also said that the reason he wears a face mask is not because of the virus, but because of chemtrails, a nefarious biological agent that is released over Belize by aircraft of some secret government agency every day. Belief in chemtrails is some next-level anti-government paranoia. And that alone should warrant a psychological evaluation of Dr. Zuniga by the Belize Medical and Dental Association to determine if he's even mentally fit to hold a medical license. When appearing on Love FM, Zuniga also made the claim that, quote, many people who get vaccinated will be dead in 2 years, end quote. Of course, he could offer no evidence to back up his opinion, but that's the beauty of conspiracy theories. You can find any nonsense you want to believe on the internet, or just pull information straight out of your own ass and there will be someone eager to believe you. Other bits of misinformation being spread by this ragtag group of anti-vaxxers include that they will be adding Belize to some international court challenge against vaccinations, and that the sentence that this court could impose might be the death penalty. Now, I have no idea what court they are talking about or who would be put to death as punishment for this so-called crime. But I think by now you understand we're not talking about people that have much of a grasp on reality. They also claim that AstraZeneca and the other COVID-19 vaccines contain, quote, known and registered and patented biological weapons, end quote. Oh, and then there was this post on their Facebook page claiming that a woman in Belize City had become magnetic after getting vaccinated. According to Belize Rights and Justice Movement, a spoon and keys were magnetically stuck to her arm. No name was offered, nor was any evidence of this remarkable phenomenon presented. I assume because, in Belize, nobody really has a cell phone capable of recording and uploading videos, right? Within a few days, both the death sentence international court case and the magnetic woman posts had been scrubbed from the Belize Rights and Justice Movement Facebook page. But fresh material, equally detached from reality, gets posted almost every day. Now, all this would be hilarious if it wasn't so dangerous. Too many people listen to this nonsense or see these social media posts and accept this garbage as truth. When anyone, including the Belize media, counters with actual credible facts from verified sources, such as the World Health Organization or the Center for Disease Control, the anti-vaxxers simply dismiss those rebuttals by saying the WHO and CDC are corrupt, and that anyone who believes in science is obviously part of a sinister agenda and is being paid by Bill Gates or George Soros or the Illuminati. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm still waiting for my check to arrive. Now, of course, the Belize Rights and Justice Movement was a direct reaction to SI 74 from the government of Belize that says that any frontline worker, which now includes teachers, restaurant workers, and anyone in the tourism industry who doesn't get vaccinated by August 1st will have to provide their employer with a negative COVID test every 2 weeks. Those opposed to this regulation are claiming that government is forcing people to get vaccinated against their will, which of course is not true. GOB is giving people who work in a higher risk occupation a choice. Get vaccinated, get tested, or get another job. People are still completely free to choose not to take the vaccine. But just like freedom of speech, freedom to decide you won't get vaccinated does not give you freedom from the responsibility for your actions. This controversial regulation became necessary because too many Belizeans are resisting getting vaccinated. Well before the Belizean rights and justice movement raised their tinfoil hat-covered heads, there was plenty of misinformation about COVID-19 and vaccines being spread throughout Belize. And a big part of the blame for the spread of misinformation and the emergence of organized efforts to derail vaccination efforts belongs squarely on the shoulders of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Since becoming Minister of Health and Wellness, Michelle Shabat has completely dismantled the information and communication system that had been put in place by the previous administration. Gone are platforms such as Ask the Experts, where Belizeans could get answers to their questions about the virus and the official response to the pandemic. Instead, all we get are a barrage of photo opportunities featuring the minister, or closely controlled press conferences where only the minister himself or politically appointed people such as his CEO are allowed to speak. No more unvarnished information from trusted sources like Dr. Marvin Manzanero, who technically is still Belize's Director of Health Services, but has been muzzled and shunned because Michelle Shabat wants to be the face and voice of the pandemic response. But what Minister Shabat refuses to accept is that people don't trust politicians, especially politicians who only want to tell us what a great job they're doing and gloss over any facts that might sprinkle a little rain on their victory parades. Like an alarming increase in the number of infections being reported daily, or the woefully low vaccination rate. A few weeks ago, it became so obvious that the vaccination rollout in Belize had been such a failure that the Ministry of Health and Wellness had to switch tactics from bragging about vaccinating an average of 1,000 people per day and instead ramp up the campaign to convince Belizeans to get vaccinated in much greater numbers. But instead of being honest with Belizeans that the increasing numbers of infections and the emergence of new variants meant that a third, more deadly wave of the pandemic was beginning, and that vaccines offered the only real option to avoid a repeat of November and December of last year, when we saw an average of 2 people die every single day. What we got was basically a pep rally, complete with gift bags, a song, and a public service video that portrayed a group of double vaccinated elites enjoying an illegal party in $1 million home. What we didn't get was answers to the questions that ordinary Belizeans have about vaccine safety. What the Ministry of Health and Wellness still won't talk about is the reality of the situation regarding COVID-19 in Belize and the fact that this war is far from over. This past Sunday night, attorney Audrey Matura hosted a Facebook Live session with Dr. Fernando Cuellar, who has become the de facto spokesperson for science and medicine in Belize. The live video was an opportunity for people to ask questions about vaccine safety. The 90-minute session got nearly 5,000 views and over 400 comments and questions. In just 1.5 hours, at 5 p.m. on a Sunday, on her personal Facebook page, Audrey Matura and Dr. Cuellar did more to engage Belizeans in an honest, fact-based dialogue than the Ministry of Health and Wellness has done in 5 months. So clearly, there is still an appetite in Belize for actual facts and intellectually honest information. I just hope someone at the Ministry of Health and Wellness was watching Dr. Cuellar on Sunday night and will be brave enough to tell their minister that he is losing the info war when it comes to the pandemic response and vaccination efforts. It's time for the minister to step back, to let actual doctors and scientists lead the conversation once again. It's time to be frank with Belizeans about the situation and what it will take to keep things from spiraling out of control just like they did last year. Because if you don't give people the information they need from the start, others will fill that void with half-truths and conspiracy theories and even outright lies. And once people start to believe that vaccines contain microchips or that this is all part of a global conspiracy to reduce the world population or that vaccines are dangerous and COVID-19 is not even real, it's almost impossible to change their minds later. Because once they go down that rabbit hole, anything they read or see on social media that aligns with whatever bullshit they want to believe is accepted as truth. Okay, before I go, let me send shoutouts to the other Belizean podcasters who have dropped new episodes recently. Andre Habet and Digna Ramirez have a fun interview with a Belizean kombucha maker on a lighter episode of Matafaya. Tyler J. Bermudez from the Real Thai Belize podcast talks about the situation unfolding in Cuba, the assassination of Haiti's president, and the vaccination controversy brewing in Belize. And Aria Lightfoot has an interview with the somewhat controversial and always politically polarizing figure Anwar Barrow on the Toucan View podcast. I'll post links to all these shows in the notes for this episode. Hey, on a personal note, I want to say hello to Felicia, who came up to me as I was having a coffee in Belmopan on Saturday just to let me know how much she enjoys Brent's 2 cents. And speaking of coffee, you can support this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee for only $6 Belize. You'll find a link for that in the description for this episode. Remember, you can be part of the podcast movement in Belize by sharing Brent's 2 cents with at least one person who otherwise may not know about it. And don't forget to subscribe to all the great Belizean podcasts on your favorite app so you never miss an episode from any of us. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at 2 Cents Belize. And I would especially love it if you would leave a voice message for this podcast about anything you want to talk about, like why or why not you're going to get vaccinated. And that's going to do it for episode 35 of Brent's 2 Cents. Until next time, please continue to wear your masks, wash your hands, get vaccinated, don't believe everything you see on the internet, and most importantly, be nice to each other.
Brent's 2 Cents is a presentation of OSHA Productions, Belize's affordable professional video production company.